see. There we go. Okay. Hopefully that works. So one of the things that I had to wrestle with going to Jerusalem was, what is the difference between being a pilgrim versus being a tourist? Because you go as a tourist, you are on your own timeline, you stay in a nice hotel, you visit a museum, you visit a site, you go catch a show, or go eat a nice meal, those kinds of things. And I tell you, there was a real difference. I've been to the Middle East twice now in the last 12 months. So our Egypt trip in January was pretty much a tourist trip. And our Israel experience was a pilgrim experience. And the two were very different. And so I find this quote helpful from Rodney Aist. He was our pilgrimage director and guide on our pilgrimage. And in his book on how to be a pilgrim in the Holy Land, he writes, while tourists observe from afar, pilgrims traverse social and physical landscapes, crossing boundaries and engaging the other. As a tourist, we tend to keep ourselves in a bubble. As a pilgrim, we enter into the fullness of the community that we're visiting. So in the case of visiting the Holy Land, it is living with the people, eating with the people, hearing stories from the people, and praying with people, getting this real sense that we are a part of a larger fellowship. And so I hope some of that will come through in the experience that we share tonight. He also writes that the pilgrim's quest is the search for God. We live and move and have our being, yet whose thoughts and ways are not our own. God is our journey and destination, our guide, companion, our essence and agency. And so what I want to say about that is that Lent is very much, I think, a pilgrim journey for us always, because the goal of Lent isn't how long can we go without chocolate and testing that. It is getting ourselves ready to celebrate Easter. Lent is all about preparing to celebrate Easter, all about preparing to account for the risen Lord. And so we are on a pilgrimage now here in Freehold at St. Peter's as we go through our Lent journey. And so with that, I want to begin with a pilgrim prayer. Let us pray. Dear God, we ask your blessings as we travel today in spirit. Guide our minds as we learn of those who came before us, traversing the pilgrim way. Give us a hunger to seek your face in paths, through fields, along roads trodden by many seeking the blessing of your presence. Nurture our fellowship and help us to see each other as a brother or sister, sharing the journey to your blessed kingdom. Amen.
Amen.
This prayer was written by a parishioner of an Episcopal church in Greensboro, North Carolina, took a virtual pilgrimage to Canterbury during the pandemic. And so they really put themselves in that pilgrimage set. So every pilgrimage needs a guide, and we have two guides for this journey. Our first guide is a woman named Egeria, and I'll say a little bit more about her in a few minutes, but she lived in the 4th century. And our other guides are Father Jim and me, if Father Jim shows up. And tonight, we also have Mother Leslie, who is also with us on this pilgrimage journey, along with her sister, Mother Lauren. So, you know about me. Who is this Egeria woman? She was a pilgrim to the Holy Land in the 380s. She was from Spain or France. So imagine traversing the breadth of the Roman Empire to get from Spain or France into the Holy Land. She took a pilgrimage for 3 years, and she kept a diary and wrote a very long letter she addressed to her sisters. We only have a fragment of this letter, so we don't have the beginning. That's what we don't know as much about her life. The only thing we know about her is through this letter, through what some others have written about her from later centuries. But she continually references her sisters in the letter. We don't know if she means her community or if she was a nun in writing religious community. But what's important about the letter is that she described journeys with what she saw. And what she saw in Jerusalem pretty much became the foundation of our Holy Week worship. And it is the primary source for understanding how Christians worship in 4th century Jerusalem. And we'll learn a little bit later about why the 4th century was so important in Christianity. And so, like I said, her writings are the foundation for Holy Week liturgies. And writings themselves disappeared into history and were rediscovered in the 19th century when someone discovered a manuscript stuck in the back of another manuscript. And so that's how we basically recovered Egeria. We knew she existed. We knew about her because others cited her, but we never had her manuscript until it was rediscovered in the 19th century. So she's an impressive woman. So orienting ourselves a little bit to Jerusalem. Jerusalem has a very long history, but we're going to basically pick it up in the 500 years or so before the birth of Christ. That period in Jerusalem is called the Second Temple period. The reason why it's called the Second Temple period is because the first temple, the Temple of Solomon, had been destroyed by the Babylonians. And when the Israelites were freed from their exile and returned to Jerusalem, they immediately set about building a second temple. And so that temple defines Judaism for the next 500 years. In the in year 6 of our current year, so right around the time of the birth of Christ, Judea officially becomes a province of the Roman Empire. And it is known as the Roman province of Judea until 135. The Roman emperor is in charge and rules through local rulers, specifically in this case, the Jewish kings. King Herod, of course, being the one who's the most famous. In 70 AD, Jerusalem itself and the Second Temple were utterly destroyed, just completely obliterated by the Roman Empire when they were putting down a Jewish revolt against outside Roman. If you've ever seen the movie Masada, that's part of that story. Then there was another revolt in the year 135, and Rome basically completely smashed it, ended the identity of Jerusalem as a Jewish city, and renamed it Aelia Capitolonia, Capitolina. Nancy, our Kathy Ball is on here. She can pronounce it better than I can. But basically, it became a full Roman city, completely erasing all evidence of both Judaism and Christianity. And they erected huge statues of Zeus and of Venus and of other Roman gods throughout the city on top of Jewish and Christian holy sites. This is what Jerusalem looked like during the Second Temple period. You're standing on the Mount of Olives, looking across the Kidron Valley, and you see the Temple Mount. This is the temple the way it looked in the day of Jesus. On the south side of the temple, which is on your left, you'll see a set of steps. That was the main entrance into the temple. And anytime you read about Jesus teaching or preaching on the temple steps, that's where it was. The explanation of the descent of the Holy Spirit and the Acts of the Apostles, right there on the temple steps. And then you see all the courtyards of the temple complex, and then the actual temple itself. And if you were to look at the temple and then lift your eyes up to the other side walls of the holy city of Jerusalem, then you would see where there would be a Jewish burial ground, and that's where Jesus was buried, and where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre stands today, where the site of the tomb of Jesus. So that is a model that you could visit in Israel. Where is it?
Is that the Israeli Museum?
At the Israeli Museum, and it's like built to scale and everything. So it's really impressive.
What would be the Wailing Wall?
Thank you for leading me into that. So this is the same view of Jerusalem today. And so you see that huge compound there. That is the foundation of the Temple Mount. And on the left-hand side, you see what remains of the temple steps. Where the temple itself is located, now the Dome of the Rock, which is, of course, a Muslim holy site. And then to the left, you see a gray dome, that is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And anybody can visit the Temple Mount for several hours during the day, except Jews. Jews are not allowed to visit, not because of Muslims, although that's part of it, but because of the Jewish law. And the reason why that is because we do not know exactly where the temple stood and where the Holy of Holies was located. And if a Jewish person were to step onto the site where the Holy of Holies was without being ritually pure, then they would be ritually unclean, and there's no way to undo that without temple worship. And yeah, because there is no temple anymore, so the purification rituals cannot be done. And so observant Jews do not want to inadvertently profane themselves and God by stepping on wherever the Holy of Holies was. Now, this is, again, another angle of the view of the model of the temple in Jesus's day. You could see the little houses on the bottom right. That's where the average people lived. You could see the nicer homes on the left. That's where the wealthier people lived. And you could see this wall along the side here. That wall is today what is known as the Western Wall of the temple. And so this is what that looks like.
Is this foundation from the original Solomon temple?
No,
it's from the second temple.
Okay, so the second temple was like all new, it wasn't built.
Right.
Okay.
And in fact, what King Herod did, he completely widened out the complex and made it the largest temple site in the world. The temple itself was the tallest building in the ancient East, except for the Pyramid of Giza. And it was also the broadest temple complex throughout any world. So it was a major deal. So this is the Western Wall today. This is the male section. The Western Wall is divided into two sections, men and anybody, because that's the way Judaism works. They divide themselves up by gender. But any man can walk up to the Western Wall to pray. And so that's me praying Psalm 121. And you can see people roll up their prayers and insert them in cracks. A Jewish man praying before the wall. Somebody putting on prayer shawls. Bar mitzvahs at the wall are a big thing. And so there was a kid going through his bar mitzvah, carrying around the Torah scroll.
And the women peeking over the wall.
Yeah. And pilgrims get tired and take naps. And so
stands, prayer stands?
Yeah, exactly. They put their Torah books, prayer books, Torahs on the stands and pray. And it's all very relaxed affair, actually. Some of these are the remaining blocks of the old temple that were destroyed. So I'm going to stop the share for just a minute and just check in with people to see if you have any questions on anything I've presented thus far. Feel free to raise your hand using the raise hand emoji if you want to get my attention, or to put something in chat if you have any questions.
Okay, I do, actually.
Okay, so I'm going to go on.
I have a question.
Yes. Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? I was just going to ask, so you're saying men can only pray at the western wall? Women cannot enter that little area?
No, there's a side right next to it where women and children can go.
Okay, so there's another side of the wall. Okay.
Yeah.
The wall goes along and there's a barrier between the two. There's
Yeah.
another wall.
And so when there are bar mitzvahs and everything, you could see all the women on chairs standing up, looking over the barrier to watch their kid get bar mitzvahed and everything. And I will say the best bathrooms in the old city of Jerusalem are at the Western Wall. So something to bear in mind if you ever go. The Austrian hospice in the old city is also another good place to step in for some coffee and a restaurant break. So continuing on with our Jerusalem timeline. And Jerusalem basically continued as a Roman city, with Christianity as an underground movement, and maybe a few Jews still left. Pretty much Jews were completely gone at that point. Remember, Christianity was illegal. Christianity did not become legal until the year 313, when the Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity. And interestingly enough, his mother was already a Christian. So kind of a good thing that he legalized Christianity. His mother, the Empress Helena, is going to be an important figure we'll talk about when we talk about Good Friday. But we'll mention her just a little bit tonight. And so that is in the 4th century. And once Christianity becomes legal, then there becomes a huge movement funded by Constantine and his mother, the Empress Helena, to build churches and worship places over the holy sites of Jesus's life. And so this is when the great period of church building begins. And this is when the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and other churches are built in the 4th century. Now, the question becomes specifically, how do we know this is the burial site of Jesus? Remember, Christians kept worshiping at that site from day one. And so the local community always knew where that site was.
Even in secret or in hiding?
Absolutely.
They were illegal. Okay.
There are also archaeological clues. For instance, over the site of the tomb of Christ, that was where the Roman Empire built a huge statue of Zeus. Why would you build a huge statue of Zeus at this particular location if you're not trying to make a statement about vanquishing a rival, kind of thing? So, and interestingly, over the site of Golgotha, Calvary, crucifixion, they had built a huge statue of Venus. So, which is interesting, a goddess of love over a site of the love of one. There is no greater love than this, but to give one's life to one's friend. So it's interesting how these little parallels come together. So the buildings themselves start to get built. And the Empress Helena, Constantine's mother, was an important figure in this because she went to the Holy Land to meet with the local bishop and to establish where the holy sites were and to supervise the construction of churches. Now, obviously, she would have gone with an entourage, she would have had experts with her and whatnot. But I also like the idea that there's this woman who by this time was in her 80s, traveling again through the Middle East and overseeing this movement to really celebrate the holiest moments of the faith. So in 335, Church of the Holy Sepulchre was first built. And we're going to quickly go through the next part of the Jerusalem timeline, moving to the Holy Sepulchre itself.
So she had to get rid of the statue of Zeus.
Yeah, she had it burned down. Yes. So in the year 614, the Persians captured Jerusalem. In 629, the Byzantines, who are, the Byzantine Empire, the successor of the Roman Empire, basically recaptures Jerusalem. And in 638, Muhammad's descendants recapture Jerusalem. And so you begin the first Muslim period, which lasts for about 450 years. Then you have the first Christian crusade, and the Christians captured Jerusalem. So you can imagine all this back and forth. All the holy sites had been destroyed during the Muslim period, and then were rebuilt during the Crusades. The Christian period lasted for about 100 years. And then the Muslims recaptured Jerusalem, and you had mostly Muslim rule between 1187 and 1516. And actually continued Muslim rule after that. But in 1516, officially, it was the Ottoman Empire, which was the successor to the Byzantine Empire after Rome had completely collapsed in the east. And Constantinople became Istanbul, and the Ottoman Empire basically took over. So the Ottoman Empire provided oversight of Jerusalem for the next 400 years, basically. In 1757, the Sultan issued something called the status quo. That is something that is critically important to this day, because Christianity had been broken up into different sects. You had the Orthodox, you had the Roman Catholics, you had the Protestants. You had various flavors of Orthodox. You had Greek Orthodox, you had Ethiopian Orthodox, you had the Coptic Church in Egypt, you had the Syrian Orthodox. They all claimed ownership of the holy sites. They all fought each other over control of the holy sites. So in 1757, the Ottoman Sultan basically said, I've had it. This is the status quo. What you have now, you will have forever. What you do not have, you will never get. So basically, the way it is right now is the way it will always be. And believe it or not, that status quo is still in effect. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre and several other holy sites. And we'll look at that in a few minutes. This is why the status quo is so important, because a conflict in Jerusalem could have global repercussions. Sounds like today, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So in 1852, a Roman Catholic priest and a Greek Orthodox priest got into a fight in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They were arguing over who had jurisdiction over something. The conflict became so severe, it rose to the level of involvement of the Ottoman Sultan. Yeah. They had worked out the conflict and come to an agreement, but France had backed the Roman Catholics, and the Ottoman Empire had backed the Greek Orthodox. Then the problem became, even though they had worked out an agreement, the Russian Orthodox jumped in and wanted to control everything. And so the Tsar of Russia basically said, no, I'm exercising jurisdiction and I'm going to war. And that started the Crimean War between Russia and France and Britain. France supported the Ottoman Empire, and Britain supported the Ottoman Empire. And that war raged on for 3 years, gave us an Episcopal saint, Florence Nightingale, and also shows how one little dispute in that little place can light a spark that can create havoc around the world. So after the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapses, and the League of Nations gave the Holy Land to Britain and to France to manage. France mostly got Lebanon, Britain mostly got Palestine. And so that became the British Mandate. And the British Mandate oversaw basically Palestine and Egypt from 1917 to 1948. In 1948, Israel declared independence and was recognized as an independent nation. And Jerusalem became divided into East Jerusalem under Palestinian authority, and West Jerusalem under Jewish authority, under Israeli authority. Then in 1967, we have the Three-Day War, and Israel then occupies East Jerusalem. And it's interesting, if you go to Israeli websites, they will say Jerusalem is united in 1967. But to this day, legally, East Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory. East Jerusalem is also where the old city is. So that's where all the holy sites are, in East Jerusalem. There used to be fences and everything. Now there's not. If you're walking one section to the other, you pretty much can't tell except the color of the buses change. And your West Jerusalem bus tickets don't work in East Jerusalem. You know, to the average tourist, you don't really notice the difference. You just suddenly don't realize everybody's speaking Arabic instead of Hebrew, and you could buy some really amazing falafel. So moving on to this, I'm not going to spend too much time on this map because I'm throwing a lot of data at you. I promise we're going to get into a lot of pictures and everything in a few minutes. But the map on the left is Jerusalem in the time of Jesus. And you can see the area that's outlined with the red and yellow hatching. That's the Temple Mount. And you can see the bulk of the city of Jerusalem goes down to the southwest of that. The old city of Jerusalem today, if you look at the map on the right, you can see the compound on the right, that is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which used to be the Temple Mount. You can basically see that the old city of Jerusalem has shifted north. This becomes a critical factor in determining where the tomb of Jesus really is. Because Christians have always said the tomb of Jesus was inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is if you look, it's due west of the Temple Mount. And you can see where the walls of Jerusalem are. You could not bury a body inside the city walls. You had to bury a body outside the city walls. Well, in the 19th century, a bright, not so bright British colonialist explorer basically looked and said, well, this is silly. The city walls are obviously here, so the Holy Sepulchre are inside the city walls. They can't be the tomb of Jesus. And then he found a cave just north of the city in this nice, beautiful glen. And he basically said, oh, this is so lovely. It's so garden-like. This has to be where Jesus was buried. So the Protestants, many Protestants will claim that as the burial site of Jesus. But Anglicans, Catholics, Orthodox all still say the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, because at the time, if you look at the map on the left, you can see where the city walls end, and Jesus was buried just on the other side of that. Here where it says Golgotha and the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, if you're able to see my mouse go around, that is outside the city walls. And that was a Jewish burial ground and a quarry. So burial site of Jesus. Jerusalem today, is the old city, is divided into 4 quarters. You have a Muslim quarter on the top right, which is predominantly Muslim. And of course, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is, and the Temple Mount. The top left is the Christian quarter. Bottom left is the Armenian quarter, which is also Christian because the Armenians were Christian. The Armenians came to Jerusalem and during World War I and shortly thereafter, to escape the Armenian genocide, and they were ceramic artists. And they were hired to retile the Dome of the Rock. And so all those tiles, the Dome of the Rock, made by Armenian Christians, and their tile work is all over the old city, and it's just gorgeous. And then to the bottom right is the Jewish quarter, and that's where the Western Wall is, and various Jewish institutions. So you can see how Jerusalem is divided up in 4 ways. Citizens of Jerusalem will tell you pretty much everybody gets along and got along just fine up until about the last 40, 50, 60 years. I'm not going to go more into that because that's beyond the scope of this discussion. But pretty much know that if you were Christian or Muslim or Jewish and you lived in Palestine, you pretty much got along fine with each other and celebrated each other's holidays until the second half of the 20th century. There were political reasons why that got challenged, not religious reasons. So here's some scenes from modern day Jerusalem. This is just outside the city walls of Jerusalem. And of course, the I Heart Jerusalem symbol. Jim and I are on top of the Mount of Olives, looking out across the Kidron Valley into the old city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem sees itself very much, it doesn't matter if you're Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, as the center of the world. And so I found this lovely tile work that was based actually on the art of a high school student, which basically shows Jerusalem at the center of the world, Europe to the top left, Africa to the bottom, and Asia to the top right. And so it's this, you have a sense of Jerusalem is this meeting place. I love this bus stop, the Talitha Kum bus stop. If in one of the gospel accounts, Jesus tells a little girl, Talitha Kum, which means, little girl, I tell you, rise up. Talitha Kum is Aramaic for rise up. There was a Lutheran school called the Talitha Kum School, which served orphan girls in the 19th and early 20th century. And this is what remains of that school. And so I just love that you're walking down Jerusalem, where we're going to dinner, and suddenly you see this Talitha Kum bus stop. Like, wow, okay. The Jerusalem City Hall, very modern, and you see the Star of David everywhere. This is the Sabbath on a very busy street. The streetcars do not run on the Sabbath. Nobody drives on the Sabbath. People were just rollerblading down the middle of one of the busy, it'd be like rollerblading down Fifth Avenue in New York. I just loved it. And I love the different types of religious people you would see walking down the streets. You see Jewish dress from all over the world. This is pretty impressive. Oh, the other thing about Jerusalem is cats. Cats are everywhere. It's almost like cats are sacred animals. So these are just some examples of Jerusalem's cats. After we had gotten to the church of, or to Jerusalem, we, like every faithful pilgrim, the next day made our way to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We stopped at the Christian Visitor Center and went up to their roof deck and looked out. And one of the things I noticed was the Dome of Rock. And if you look at the Dome of Rock, you see, like I said, all that tile work was done by Armenian Christians about 100 years ago. But if you look out, you see that the whole plaza is just filled with people. It's in the middle of Ramadan. It's a Friday, so we're all there for the noonday prayers. And
what's the significance of the Dome of the Rock?
That is where Muhammad ascended into heaven.
Okay.
But the rock itself, if you go down, it's also where Abraham almost sacrificed Isaac.
Oh, true.
So, yes. And the side on which the temple stood. So you could imagine sort of the holy energy in that space. Unless they got to touch the rock.
I did.
You're allowed to?
We were able to go inside the Dome of the Rock. You could do that by special permission. And our guide
such deep relationships with the Arab, really Palestinian, Muslim, and so our guide knows the people who run the whole Temple Mount as a mosque. So we had insider, we got to go inside and all of it.
So let me just tell you what this day is. It's Friday in Ramadan, which is a huge observance day. It is Orthodox Good Friday. And it is also the last day of Passover. To be in Jerusalem when all these holy events are all happening at the same time. But we made the mistake of trying to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre when the noonday prayers let out. We're trying to go the opposite direction. So we make it to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And I'll give you some vocabulary about the church. Holy Sepulchre is basically the tomb of Christ. Sepulchre is a burial tomb. It's interesting. Christians in the West call it the burial tomb. The Orthodox call it the anastasis, the resurrection. So they put the emphasis on the resurrection, whereas the Western Christianity puts the emphasis on the burial. And so as Anglicans, we sort of do both, but Egeria almost refers to it as the anastasis, the resurrection. Golgotha or Calvary is the site of the crucifixion. The edicule is the structure that's built over the burial tomb of Christ. And there's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the two domes. The larger gray dome is over the side of the resurrection, and the smaller gray dome is over another chapel. And then if you see sort of bottom right, you can see two arches. That's the main entrance to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
And this was built in 380 something.
Initially, yes. And so this is the original plan of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You have the rotunda over the tomb, then you had an atrium, and then you had a church, and then you had another atrium, and then you had an entrance hall. So everything, the 2/3 of what you see from the right to basically where it says the apse were destroyed during the Muslim period. And all that survived was the rotunda and the tomb and some other things, plus what was underground. And so the Church of the Holy Sepulchre today now completely covers all of that. And if you look where it says Golgotha, that's the site of the crucifixion. The tomb is the site of the burial and the resurrection. All that's now under one roof.
Okay.
And so this is the modern day floor plan. The parvis down here is the entrance pavement. You go in, you see the stone of unction, and then you turn left, you go into the big rotunda where the tomb of Christ is. And then there's many chapels around, and I'll show you a couple of those. And then as you go around the aisles and whatnot, you go down some steps towards the right, the chapel of St. Helena. Helena, remember, is the mother of Constantine. And then you go down some more steps to the right, and you see something called the grotto of the invention of the cross. Invention is basically means discovery of the cross. That's where the true cross was found. And I'll show you some pictures of that site. But you see everything here is different colors. That tells you who has jurisdiction over what parts of the building. The light blue are the Greek Orthodox. The purple are the Roman Catholic. Yellow are the Armenians. The orange are the Coptic Christians from Egypt. The light orange are the Ethiopian Christians. The sort of teal are the Syrians. They don't get very much. They just get one little chapel, St. Nicodemus. And then the gray areas are common to the Greek Orthodox, the Roman Catholics, and the Armenians. So one of the rules of the status quo is, of course, all of that is your area. Heaven forbid if you, say, as a Greek Orthodox, try to move a chair in a Roman Catholic area. That could start a war. They're much better behaved today than they were beforehand, but things could be that tense. And all 6 jurisdictions must agree on something before any repairs could be made. So it took 70 years to come up with a plan to shore up the tomb of Christ. This is the entrance pavement as you go in. This is Orthodox Good Friday. People are starting to line up for a ceremony on the right. We realized we could just go straight into the left, so I just went in and pushed my way in. The door to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and I'm going to play for you a 2-minute video on the Muslim family that has sole custody of the keys to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
A Muslim family.
A Muslim family.
Wow.
Because the Christians kept arguing over who had access, the Ottoman Sultan gave 2 upstanding Muslim families custody of the keys and the door. One Muslim family has custody of the keys. The other Muslim family has the authority to open and close the door. Nobody else can. the status quo that is still legally enforced to this day. So here's a story on the Muslim family. Yeah, I'll take it. There we go.
My name is Adib Jude al-Husseini. I am the key holder of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and the holder of the stamp of the Holy Tomb. The story of my family began in 1187 when Salahuddin al-Ayyubi liberated the city of Jerusalem from the Crusaders. The sects agreed, and from 1187 until today, we have been holding the keys of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We have preserved it with our blood and soul. It is our second home. My job is not just an honorable job, and it is not just the heritage of my family as a Muslim family. It is the heritage to all Muslims across the world that a Muslim family has held and preserved the church for 850 years. It is a feeling that cannot be described, and I envy myself for being the key holder of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I have been opening the door of the Holy Sepulchre Church since I was 8 years old, and today I am 53. For more than 40 years I've had this responsibility. My father gave me the seal of the grave when I was 12 years old, and I sealed the tomb. Now I have 3 children, and I've started teaching them. Sometimes I open, sometimes they open. The keys of the Holy Sepulchre Church are in the custody of the Jude al-Husseini family, and hopefully this will last forever. My family received 2 keys from Salahuddin al-Ayyubi because there were 2 doors. Every door had 2 locks. 2 doors, 4 locks. 1 key opens 4 locks. The key broke 500 years ago, so we use the second one. We don't want to leave the Holy Sepulchre Church. It is captive, just like Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's the same thing. We are peace callers. We hope and pray for peace to come to our region. From here, from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the light of Islamic-Christian coexistence emerged. We lived with them, and we have known them since childhood. We are in the same trenches. We have the same pain and suffering. We have the same feeling. These churches are also Arab churches, not just Palestinian. We are not just brothers in ethnicity, but also in blood.
Something I forgot to tell you about that. Let me go back to the photo. If you look at the top here of the double arches, you'll see there's a little ladder on the ledge there underneath the window. That ladder has been there for 100 years because nobody has the authority to move it. So it has been stolen twice and then replaced. And one time, I think somebody, just to sort of make a point, an Armenian who said this was silly or something, reached through the window and pulled the ladder in. But and then what they did, they put bars on the window, so that can't happen again. So I think the ladder belongs to one group, and it's on the property of another one. And that's why it can't be moved. And there's another ladder inside that's very similar to that. So when you walk in the main doors, the first thing you see is this slab of granite here. This is the anointing stone. Where the body of Jesus was laid after he came down off the cross. And the first thing you do is you kneel in reverence. Some people write down prayers and leave them there. And this is at the end of the day, and so you can see on Good Friday, less, so you can see how sort of trashed up it's got. But by the way, that's the other ladder you can't move. It's a Roman Catholic ladder, but if they move it, they can never put it back. And so they leave it there just in case they need it. So, this is me getting ready. I'm surrounded by pilgrims from Ethiopia. You could recognize the Ethiopian pilgrims because they would take white cloths that they would wrap around themselves when they prayed as a sign of their baptism. When they come in, they would come up with this cross and just rub it all on the stone for pick up the blessing. And this is one of two places in Christianity where you can lay an object and it is automatically blessed without saying a prayer of blessing. The other place is the tomb of Christ itself. And so what our faculty advisor did, he had bought a whole big thing of all of the crosses and laid them on the anointing stone and gave them to us.
My sister and each got a cross, and we laid on our last time going, we laid it.
That was a common preparation.
Yeah.
It was just there for anyone who died. That's what I was told.
Well, this particular stone only dates to the 11th century. So it was probably not the stone that Jesus was laid on. But it was, but the memory and the prayers of the faithful have hallowed it in that way. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, the body had to be anointed before being buried. And because it's I just walking in, and of course, poor Jim, he didn't know about all these things. I'd done all reading and prep. I mean, they're like, oh my God, I'm here. And then, I'm jostling through like everybody else, and I'm there for like maybe, 35 seconds. And it's crazy. You just kind of have enough to say, oh my God, I'm here at this place, and touch it, kiss it, and say the Our Father, and on. Then you go around the corner, and immediately this is the view that captures your eye. This dome, I mean, there's always been a dome here, but this particular one was only completed in like the last 40 years. It was refurbished, and it's just gorgeous. It's open at the top. You can see the beam of sunlight coming through. That's the edicule. That covers the grotto where Christ was buried. So the tomb of Christ was hewn into a hillside. It's Joseph of Arimathea's tomb, actually. Remember? And he gave it to be for the burial of Christ. So what has happened over the centuries is that people carved down the tomb just to the sort of like its outer structure, and then they built this house on top of it. And so, the actual tomb itself is inside, but it's now all covered with marble and everything. So you don't see the actual, there's this one little spot of you see the actual stone. But it's still an amazing sight. I'll say more about this when we talk about the Easter Vigil. But the ceremony of Holy Fire is an important ceremony where the Easter fire is lit inside the tomb, and then it's passed around to all the faithful. And if you see little black holes there on the side, that's to help get the fire out to people as fast as possible. Because there's a faithful custom that says for the first 33 minutes, the fire cannot hurt you. And so you see people like holding the fire around their face and running their hands through it, all that sort of thing. This is inside the tomb itself. You're not supposed to take a picture, so I took this off the internet. But this is the burial slab of Christ. And if you pull up those two slabs, then you'll find the actual stone rock where the body of Christ laid. We crawled, Leslie, I don't think you did, but did you go down into Lazarus's tomb?
Oh my gosh, it was the worst thing I've ever done. And I didn't go down into it.
I went into Lazarus's tomb, but you're really like crawling. That hasn't been.
Go through this tiny little slide through.
Yeah.
It's getting down there.
It was tiny. So when you think about your gospel passages, all this makes sense, but I'm walking along past the edicule, and suddenly I look down and there's a little star on the pavement. That was where Mary Magdalene encountered the garden. That was the risen Christ. And this altar commemorates that moment. And I'm just going like, of course it's right here, because that's where Mary Magdalene was. And looking back, I'm standing on the site where Mary Magdalene encountered the risen Lord, and you're looking back at the edicule at the tomb. So then you go around a bit more, you go down some steps. This is the chapel of St. Helena. the mother of the Emperor Constantine, and the woman whose efforts led to the building of all the holy sites. And it's just gorgeous. Then if you go down some more steps, you come to the grotto where the cross itself was found. And this is a woman praying. Here's a slide. One second. Okay, I know what I did wrong. There we go. You go down, this is Helena, the statue of the Empress Helena holding the true cross, which was found just to the right. And so this is a altar dedicated to that. If you go down the stairwell, find crosses carved in stone, graffiti from pilgrims from the last 1,000 years. And then as you round the bend down there, this is the spot where the 3 crosses were found. And this is a woman from Ukraine who was praying. And she told me later that she was praying for her son who was in the Ukrainian army. And she asked me to take her picture so she could send it to her son, that she was praying at the site of crucifixion for him. And so you could just imagine the prayers that people carry with them to this sacred site. Then there's a little niche in the wall on the other side. That's that all just showed you a minute ago. This is an Ethiopian pilgrim just praying on this side, just standing there, reading through her prayer book, praying her psalms or whatever. She had a little prayer carpet down below. She'd occasionally kneel down, prostrate, bow her forehead to the ground and whatnot. Then we went back up to another part of the chapel of St. Helena. These are other Ethiopian pilgrims just sitting there resting and talking amongst themselves. Then we made our way around and we went up to Golgotha, which is just up a stairwell off the entrance. So if you saw the anointing stone earlier, that photo I took from, if I turned around, that's what I would see. So this is the side of the crucifixion. If you see the glass floor there, the stones underneath there, that is rock dogger. And there's an altar there, and the tradition is there's a hole in the floor, and you underneath the altar, and you can kneel down, reach in, and touch the base of where the cross would have stood. And this is Orthodox Good Friday, so all candles were lit up and everything, and it was just amazing. You could just see the crucifix, the Orthodox crucifix, all the icons with the silver cladding on them and everything. Right next to it is the Roman Catholic chapel, because this is the Eastern Orthodox chapel. The Roman Catholic chapel is actually dedicated to where they took the body off the cross to carry it to the anointing stone. So, but the two are linked. This is another step back view of the side of the crucifixion. And that's the Roman Catholic chapel. And you can see that's, basically the cross is now taken down and they're getting ready to take the body off the cross. These are all the people lined up to go in and pay homage at the site of the crucifixion. Now, during the day, they have incense ceremonies where they have processions of incense that go around and incense all the altars and all the holy sites. They have 2 Muslim doorkeepers walk ahead to part the crowds. And they wear fezzes, and they have these big giant staffs that they tap the pavement with, and they basically say, make way, make way, make way, move, move. And they say it in English because it's always the Americans or the English who are the offenders. But, this huge packed crowd to make way for people doing the incense. And so I took a video of that, and you'll see a little bit of that happen. Yeah. And you could hear the man, he was shouting, open, 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 as many, let us through, let us through. And they will literally run you over. I actually later on got in the way of the group and I was like, yes, pushed aside. But it's just that, and then just some parting scenes. We were walking along, and I just saw these religious women walking. It looked so timeless. That's why I did the photo in black and white. Ethiopian pilgrims walking outside the old city back up to wherever they were staying. And two Roman Catholic friars, Franciscan friars, walking to the Roman Catholic Patriarchate that oversees the Holy Land sites on behalf of the Catholic Church. So I'm going to stop here and just say that, oh my gosh, I'm only 5 minutes late. Mark, I'm not sure if it is the same families. It may just be, the families are huge extended families now, so I'll bet you they are same families. I'm actually not sure, just to answer your question there. But to be there on Orthodox Good Friday was both phenomenal and absolute chaos, just literal chaos. What that taught me was how God is present in the chaos of everyday life. And how even in the midst of that chaos, you could find quiet places just to go to this side, like the Ethiopian woman found that ditch just to sit and pray. And I went very concerned that I would lose sight of the holiness of the original events because of all the marble things that covered them. Instead, I found myself just blown away by the faithfulness of the people over the centuries, tending these sites, worshiping these sites, praying at these sites. You know, when you see somebody kneeling at the stone of anointing, tears just flowing down and rubbing their prayer shawl around the stone before they take it and go pray, you just can't help but be moved by it. And just the profound power of what happened in that moment. What I wanted to share with you all tonight was some sense of a connection to the historical, physical realities that we commemorate in Holy Week. That there are places where you could actually go and touch. This is where the body of Jesus laid. This is the side of the resurrection. I asked Rodney, our guide, if I said, you know, because he did a PhD in religious pilgrimage and he has huge archaeological experience and he's up on all the latest archaeological studies. And I said, you know, to what extent are we certain that these are the sites? And he said, these days, we are very certain that these are the sites. He said, now, in some cases, we know it down to the foot, like the tomb of Christ is the tomb of Christ. He said, in some cases, it may be, okay, the event happened here, but it may not have happened here. It may have happened 40 feet over here. But you're basically in these spots. And that's just the kind of thing that just sits there and makes you go, wow. And then, you know, to walk on the Mount of Olives, which is mentioned so often in Jesus's teachings, and to realize how close that was. It's a 45-minute walk from the top of the Mount of Olives to the temple gates. And, you know, the Kidron Valley in John's Gospel, Passion account, to see how that's just, you know, this valley there that's now, you know, a roadway goes through it and whatnot. But that's when we say the Kidron Valley, that's what that is. What we do with our liturgy is we're not trying to pretend we're in Jerusalem. We're not trying to pretend it's 2,000 years ago. What we are trying to do is to offer worship in a way that allows us to enter into the holiness of those moments, to both cross time and space into those moments when they happen, but to also bring them into our lives today. And so when we go ahead and next week is Palm Sunday, I want to ask, what does it mean to have a procession go into the city? What does it mean to proclaim Jesus as the Messiah, as the one, this humble figure in the face of the impending arrival of Pontius Pilate and right on King Herod's doorstep? One of the things that intrigued me was how, even as pilgrims, we often tone down the message of Jesus. There's a church on the Mount of the Olives called the Eliona, which is built over the site of where Jesus gathered with his disciples to teach during that last week. And this is where he gave his apocalyptic discourse, which is basically, now is the time when the world is coming to an end, and this is what's going to happen. And the Church of the Eliona today is dedicated instead to the giving of the Lord's Prayer, which happened in Galilee, not in Jerusalem. And it's like, okay, let's get away with all that apocalyptic stuff and let's talk about the Lord's Prayer because it makes us feel nice. It's the softening of Jesus. And, God knows we need the softening of Jesus, but this is also the Jesus of the cross. And it's like, okay, I touched the stone of Golgotha. That cross is real. And how do I carry my own cross in today's world? What is the witness that I make in my life today to the fullness of who Jesus is? So those are just kind of some of the things that I've been playing with and writing through my mind. I have taught way, way much and show you way, way more than I will show you in any of the future sessions. So I appreciate your patience with that, but I want to stop now and ask if you have any observations or questions, any clarifications you want, or just anything, observances, comments you want to make.
When I went to Jerusalem, I was struck by how close everything is.
Oh, you've been there. I didn't realize. Okay, yes. Yeah. Jerusalem, the old city, the size of Disneyland.
Yeah, barely.
Yeah.
And it just seems like a microcosm, like you go through the markets and there's some Muslim sellers and Jewish sellers.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of getting along because they're just
and they do. That's what's really, they look out for one another too, because everybody who lives in the old city is under the same threat because their culture is evaporating. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Christian, or Jewish, their culture is evaporating because what's happening is millionaires and billionaires are buying up land in the old city. And, like the Armenians now are very concerned that their land is being bought up by non-Armenians and that they're going to eventually lose access to their border. And that's something that's they're very concerned about. And of course, there's always tension between Arabs and Israelis, not between Muslims and Jews, but between Arabs and Israelis. I want to be very clear about that. Jew is a religious designation, as is Muslim. Arab is an ethnic designation, and Israeli is a citizenship. And in fact, Arabs who are citizens of Israel tell you very clearly they are not Israelis. They are Arab citizens of Israel. That's a very clear distinction for them. And that also permeates. Leslie and I were talking today, and you can't get to Bethlehem anymore because Israel has shut down the West Bank. And so you can't even go, even if you got to Jerusalem, couldn't do a pilgrimage like we did.
And the people in Bethlehem can't get in or out.
Yeah.
And that happens to most cities or towns.
Yeah. And it's very hard on everybody because one of the things we experienced, in talking with an average Israeli or an average Palestinian, they all want the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They all want the same thing. And they don't want to make it worse.
the worst tension I experienced were from just business people that I work with. Everyone's in the Israeli Defense Force.
Yeah.
And they serve their country, and the hostility that they had to the Hasidic community was really, really, like, so much more so than any Palestinian and Arab. Just off the charts.
And there's some real concerns about, the strength of ultra-conservative groups within Judaism and the influence that they're getting, because Israel was founded to be a secular state.
That's right.
And it's still like secular Jews versus religious Jews, liberal religious Jews versus conservative religious Jews versus ultra-Orthodox Jews. It's all these conflicts just kind of come together. So.
But still, I was impressed in how in that old city, everyone seems to just get along.
Yeah. Anybody else have any reflections you want to offer, or any questions? Let me put it out this way. Of the sites that you saw, what either surprised you or impressed you the most? Does anybody want to chip in with that?
Could you repeat? What did you say?
What, out of all the sites that I showed you in the pictures, what surprised you or impressed you the most?
I would say that I was fortunate enough back in 1967 to visit the Holy City.
Wow.
I was there for about a week. I was in the church, the Holy Sepulchre. I saw where Christ was buried. I was in the Garden of Gethsemane where he was betrayed. And I would say, having seen what you saw, it's very different, because at that time, you could only fly into the city or country from a certain direction.
Okay.
And we were there, as I said, about a week or so. And the day after I got back, that's when the series of wars between the Arab and Jerusalem started. But while I was there, the people were very nice. I was fortunate enough, because I worked for Pan American, to have a private driver and tour for everything. So I saw a lot of things that perhaps the ordinary visitor would not see. And I don't know if you remember that cross, that golden cross, a Crusaders cross that I wear.
Yes.
Well, I bought that in Jerusalem. I sat down and had coffee and tea with the jeweler, and we bargained over it. And it's said, oh, and I paid $35 for it.
Wow.
I was fortunate enough also to go up and swim in the Dead Sea.
Yes.
So that was really good. But just the spirit of being there in the Holy City, the diversity of people that I didn't even know existed.
Exactly.
I saw Jews, I saw Black people of other faiths that I just never ever thought existed in the world. And so I think at that time, clearly, historically, I guess it makes sense, life was a little bit simpler. And it was just very easy to move around, and everybody was very friendly and stuff like that. And to place it in time when I went there, is anybody, you've heard of the Hotel David, where often these highfalutin power political meetings.
Right.
That year that I went, and I spent the night or the week in the Hotel David. When when the cost was probably like $25. But right now,
Wow.
I've had to save up 5 years to pay, to have a room in it. But we didn't pay any more than $25. So it opened a day or two before we arrived. It is, in summary, it is a fantastic emotional trip. Okay.
Yes.
Of course, I went to Greece afterwards, so added into it too. So it was really wonderful. I felt this was a very special place. And that's all I have to say, maybe too much.
I appreciate that. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
I have
Who
a
else?
question.
Yes.
It's very interesting when you describe the status quo being imposed in 1757 by the Ottoman Empire, and it has been maintained to this day. But when the status quo was delivered, the Ottomans were, in fact, the political economic rulers of the place. So who is maintaining the status quo? How do you make sure that everybody does what they're supposed to do?
Believe it or not, the Israeli police enforce the status quo on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. When we were there last year, a fight broke out between, I think between a Coptic and an Ethiopian monk, because the Ethiopian monk picked up his chair and put it underneath a tree to sit and read on a hot day, and that was on the Coptic part of the roof. And the two monks got into a fist fight. And the Israeli police had to come and arrest them and take the chair back, and and it made papers and everything. It's crazy. It's crazy the level of tensions that could come out of it.
And they'll know
like
we are Christians by our love.
Like I'm sorry, Kathy?
He said, and they'll know we are Christians by our love.
And yet at the same, it's interesting. Our Anglican Archbishop in Jerusalem is Archbishop Hossam, who is his office in the cathedral at St. George's College, where we stayed. And he is given the rank of Archbishop so that he could be seen as a peer to the Orthodox and Roman Catholic and other patriarchs. And he's part of the Patriarch Council of like eight religious figures. And they meet regularly, they pray with one another all the time, and they will issue joint letters, they'll attend each other's ceremonial events. And, it's interesting though, Anglicans do not have access to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre for worship purposes. But the Armenians who do give us access to one of their altars. And so occasionally an Anglican Eucharist will be held inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre at an Armenian altar, because the Armenians let us in to do that. And so there are all kinds of relationships that go on. And I just have to imagine sometimes that, to be honest, I sometimes wonder if the various religious groups do not send their brightest to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to live, because of the way they just get into fights over little things. I'm not sure. But the patriarchs and the religious leaders are all very close to one another, very supportive of one another. And the Christians, all the Christians are concerned that they are a declining minority in the Holy Land. And basically, all native Christians of the Holy Land are Palestinian. Obviously, because they're not Jewish. Some are Palestinians with Israeli citizenship, and some are Palestinians in occupied Palestine. But they all are all Palestinian, and so that also brings in certain concerns. But for the most part, Christian communities try very, very hard to be bridge builders. And, they have very strong positive relationships with Israeli officials and with larger Muslim world as well. Any other questions? I want to thank you for indulging me tonight. Next week, we will look specifically at Palm Sunday. We'll look at the Palm Sunday liturgy. We'll look at how Egeria described Palm Sunday. And we'll look at the various Palm Sunday sites in Jerusalem, where the route that Jesus would be taken down Mount of Olives, and sort of what happened in the first 3 days of Holy Week that we always talk about, and some of those holy sites. And then we'll continue on to our journeys on Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday, until we get to the great celebration of Easter. So anything else to come up? Then what I would like to do is to close with this prayer. That is also a Celtic prayer of blessing. Oops, and it just went away. Try this again. It's not. There it is. God bless the path on which we go. God bless the earth beneath our feet. God bless our destination. God be a smooth way before us, a guiding star above us, a keen eye behind us, this day, this night, and forever. God be with us whatever we pass. Jesus be with us whatever we climb. Spirit be with us wherever we stay. God be with us at each step, at each lying down, each rising up, in the trough of the waves, on the crest of the billows, each step of the journey we take. Amen.
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 This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will make